Okay, this is Gerald Britt. I am Vice President of External Affairs for CitySquare. This is our second podcast, and I think we have who I consider to be a very exciting and influential guest in a rather unusual vein of nonprofits. He has become one of the most stellar spokesmen for the prison reentry population. And I'm proud to say that he is not only a friend of mine, but he's also family. Talking about Richard Miles, who is the executive director and founder of Miles of Freedom. And Richard and I first met. Not first met, we were reconnected back in 2010, not long after I'd been working on with Jamie Page and some others on getting the compensation increased for the wrongfully incarcerated. That legislation passed, and someone who brought Richard Miles to my office and kind of held him outside the door and said, "There's somebody here who wants to meet you," and I told him to bring him in, and lo and behold, it was Richard Miles. He is my cousin. His grandmother is my aunt, and he and I had not seen one another, I think, since he was at least 8 years old.
Yeah, it's a long time.
It was a long time, and little did I know that in working for the compensation, increased compensation for the wrongfully incarcerated, that would wind up benefiting family.
Family, right? Thank you, cousin.
Suffice it to say, I'm proud of that work for a number of reasons.
Right.
Not just because of the justice, the justness of it, but also for this particular person who's benefited from it. So, Richard, glad to have you.
Oh man, I'm excited. Thank you, cousin Brett, for this opportunity.
The pleasure's all mine. Believe
Yes,
me.
sir.
So it's a long way from a prison cell to becoming the type of community presence that you've been. It cost you 15 years of your life plus. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this journey you've been on?
Yes, sir. So as you said, it's been more than 15 years. I spent a total of 15 years in prison, and then 2.5 years after I was released, waiting on a full exoneration of actual innocence. So I say it was a 17 and a half year journey or fight. But man, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, Glendale Park area. Raised up in a very, I call our family spiritually guided.
Yeah.
I comically joke and say we went to church about 15 days out of the week. So anytime my dad found the church door, he slid us in it. And so growing up, that was what I was centered around. You know, I went to Skyline and Kimball High School. Right when I was getting ready to graduate, we went to TSTC in Waco, so I was getting ready to go to plastics engineering because that was the trade that I was taking at Skyline.
Right.
So working at McDonald's, my 18th year, I left home from where we were staying in Glendale Park, went to move in with one of the managers at McDonald's. In that year of May 15th, 1994, I went to visit my girlfriend. She stayed in Robin Oaks Apartments. Went early that day, got over there probably about 10 o'clock that morning. Stayed with her pretty much all that day. One of my friends, Ernest, he stayed in the back of the apartments with his mom. So by the time I was ready to leave, buses had stopped running. It was about 12:30, 1 o'clock. I remember it like it was yesterday because Flavor TV used to come on the videos. Right. And so everybody stay up at night. They come on by 12 o'clock. And so we're sitting up there, we're watching the videos in his mom's house. And I tell him, I say, hey man, I'm ready to go to the house. I was staying in North Dallas by Love Fair Airport on Crest Haven and Bluffview, on the corner of Crest Haven and Bluffview. His girlfriend stayed on University in Roper. And so if you know anything
Wow.
about the area,
Yeah.
it's right around the corner. And so we got in the car. He had a blue Cutlass. We left Robin Oaks apartment, went to North Dallas. We stopped at the 7-Eleven. It used to be on Inwood. I bought me a pack of cigarettes right there. We kept straight and we got to Roper and University.
Right.
She stayed right there, 2 houses from the corner. I got out of the car. I paid Ernest $5. I walked up University to Lemon. I'm looking at the Love Fair Airport, and I make a right, and I'm walking in front of the Sewell Cadillac shops.
Right.
You know, and Bluffview veers off of Lemon Avenue.
Right.
And so I veer off on Bluffview to get to the red Coleman on the corner of Lover's Lane and Bluffview,
Right.
the payphone.
Right.
Cell phones wasn't out back then. So it was pretty late, and I was calling my friend James. I said, hey man, I'm right here across the street. Can you cut the alarm off? I'll be crossing the street and I'll be home shortly. Cut the alarm off. I hung up the phone. I'm crossing the street, and there's a police car sitting on the corner of Bluffview and Lover's Lane. Didn't pay any attention to it, walked beside it. The next thing I heard was a helicopter, and then a light shined on me. Now I'm 19 years old at this point in time. Didn't have nothing on me. I looked up, hadn't done anything wrong, so I kept walking. About a couple of seconds later, police cars came from everywhere. And they get out of the car, they have the guns pulled on me, and they're saying, get on the ground, get on the ground. So I'm laying on the ground.
What are you thinking at this time?
You know what? So much was going on. It was nothing to think about. The only thing I could do was do what they wanted me to do.
Right.
I wasn't trying to
You weren't trying to protest?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to do nothing. I wasn't protesting. No. All I was doing was complying. And so really to try to think, it wasn't even a rational idea.
Right.
You know, so I'm laying on the ground. Now, when they handcuffed me and put me in the police car, I'm telling the police officers, I said, man, my friend just dropped me off. He's right around the corner. You can go talk to him if anything is going on. They said, well, we're going to take you downtown. They haven't told me why I'm arrested yet.
Right.
I said, we're going to take you downtown, let you talk to the detective. Once you get down there, if everything is all right, then you'll go home. I'm cool. So we stop at a Texaco on Bachman Lake. They didn't take me straight downtown. Mm-hmm. When we got to the Texaco, I remember going behind the Texaco. The lake sits behind it, and I get out of the police car and I see police lights and ambulances, and I'm looking around, and somebody come and put some stuff on my hands because I got on handcuffs.
Right.
Put me back in the police car and take me to homicide. When I got to homicide, I'm in a room pretty much like this here, a single table and 2 chairs, and the detective comes in and he asked me where I had been that night. I gave the detective the phone number of my girlfriend, Ernest's mom's, Ernest's girlfriend, and my friend James.
So you got alibis.
Alibis.
Right.
I gave him these phone numbers the same night. He left out, he stayed gone for about 6 or 7 hours, and he came back and he said, well, Richard, your story checked out. He said, but we have a person that say they saw you kill one person and shoot another person, and you're going to be arraigned for murder and attempted murder. And so at the age of 19, I was escorted from Capers downtown to Lew Sterrett. My bond was set at $350,000 for murder and attempted murder that I had no knowledge of. It was very overwhelming that night. First and foremost, to call my mom.
Right.
You know,
right.
I think the situation to me wasn't as heavy because I was innocent. So I'm like, well, you know, it's going to be all right. But to call my mom and tell her I'm locked up for murder was kind of hard to do. But I remember calling her, and she answered, and she gave me some encouraging words. She said, man, we know that you're innocent. We feel in our hearts that you're innocent, and we're going to be with you till this is over with. Fast forward, I stayed in the county jail 17 months. I met my court-appointed attorney because we didn't have the resources to get a free world attorney, nor could I bond out. My court-appointed attorney did the research. I had 10 witnesses. 10 witnesses seen a person get killed and 1 person get shot. 9 of the witnesses said I did not look like the shooter. The description of the shooter was 6'2", 6'4", real dark complected, had on white shirts and the shorts. I was 5'7", 5'8", light skinned, had on white shirts and pants. It was a young lady that was their friend that was there, and she testified that I was not the shooter. All of my alibis came to testify. No gun, anything. 7-day jury trial yielded to a verdict of guilty. Special trial, special court on a Saturday yielded to 60 years in the Texas Department of Corrections.
Wow. This is Gerald Britt. I'm interviewing Richard Miles, who is the founder and the executive director of Miles of Freedom. And Richard, the story that you told, the one thing that struck me in this story is the amazing amount of detail that you remember about this almost 20 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And it's amazing because I can't, press me, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night.
Yeah.
But this is so impactful to you that it's almost like every detail is seared in your memory.
Yes, sir.
What is it like to live like that? Because of course you've been exonerated now. Without getting into too much personal level, you got much resources now.
Yes, sir.
Relationships now that you would never have thought that you'd have.
Right.
But yet you live with this, not just in your past, but clearly in your present.
Right. I being a spiritual person, I can only parallel it to Paul. My wrongful incarceration is my thorn. Right. It doesn't matter how much I'm able to accomplish out here, how much people see the work that we're able to do as an organization. It comes from a very dark and hurtful and painful space, and so because of those things, it's very hard for me to forget. But opportunities like this here, where I'm able to talk about it, is very therapeutic for me. And so it's hurtful, but it also stabilizes me, and it keeps me in a point of grace. Yeah.
So you're 19 years old.
Yes, sir.
You're looking at 60 years in prison.
Yeah.
And what's it like when you hear the verdict?
Oh, when they gave me the verdict, I sat down. So you're standing in front of the judge with your lawyer and everybody, and it was 8 hours after deliberation.
Right.
8 hours of deliberation. And when they said guilty, I sat down, and my lawyer started nudging me. I was like, man, you got to stand up and you got to respect the courts. And in my head, I'm like, how do you respect an entity that just totally disrespected you, disregarded justice from all degrees and angles? But because I'm under the authority,
right,
I have to submit to the authority.
Right.
And so I stood up and I accepted the punishment from the context of the court system, and I turned and seen my mom and dad for the last time for a long time in the 282nd Court in Dallas, Texas.
Thelma and your dad?
Yes, Thelma. Yes, Bishop William L. Lord.
Yeah, they are were. Your dad since passed away.
Yes,
but they were two people of faith.
Yes,
pastor the church.
Yes, sir.
How were they impacted by this?
Oh man, hindsight is 20/20, and I thought I was the only person that went to prison that day, but my whole family was incarcerated. From that context, our church. Imagine being a pastor of a church and your son goes to prison for murder.
Yeah.
Congregation go pretty slim there. You know, the Lord is not moving in this space.
Right.
So our church was impacted. I don't know. I believe my family was impacted because of supporting me. A lot of my family members, because when a person is found guilty in the court of law, we automatically assume they are guilty.
Right.
And, we will separate from them. And so it was challenges internally with our family. But the fact that my mom and my dad stayed with me and they fought this fight for me and with me, it was very important. And they stood there with me and for me.
How does, were you scared?
Oh, yeah. Going in, I was on Cofield unit. So Cofield is one of the over 100 prisons. I think Texas has about 111 prisons. Cofield is one of the biggest prisons in Texas. It's one of the oldest. It houses over 5,000 men. Maximum security. I'm the youngest person over there, pretty much. And to go to this unit was very frightening. I thought of, suicide. I thought I got very angry, depressed. And so it's a lot that you have to go through to be disconnected from society as it is,
right,
and be placed in an institution. That's very, I think, mentally draining for you as well.
Right.
And every day is that day that they're going to get it right today.
Right.
And if you can imagine 15 years just hoping that next day
next
is
day.
it's like a drop of water just constantly dripping, and only by God's grace I was able to mentally maintain through that.